Alright, welcome back to another tarot card review. This deck is by Deborah, Everyday Witch Tarot. Art by Elisabeth, Alba. So, I was drawn to this deck long before I ever knew that this deck existed. I found this artwork online of a witch with a lion, and I liked it so much I used it as a profile picture for well, one of my banking stuff. So when I got this deck, because I had decided to do a whole bunch of tarot card reviews, and I found that image on one of these cards, I thought to myself, well, I guess I was meant to have this deck, because I absolutely loved that art style. And going through this deck, I absolutely love the fact that I have an entire deck with this beautiful work. Now, when you're a witch, you have access to many different things that can help you in your journey. I think it's very important to write things down, and I also think that it's extremely important to have the right tools for the right thing that you need. I have a lot of books, like a ridiculous number of books related to my studies as a witch. I find that being a witch means learning is my favorite thing to do. So this is one of my books that I like to write stuff down in, and so pen and notebook are one of the tools that is of the utmost importance for being a witch. Now, meditation is another one of those things. Being able to visualize stuff for spell work is of the utmost importance. So I have a lot of candles. I have a lot of candle holders. I also have a lot of incense. Incense helps me meditate and focus. Clear the air, cleanse things, get myself in the mood to do some visualizations or spells. Another focus that I like to use is, of course, stones. This one in particular is blood quartz, and I have had this one for quite a few years, and I use it as a focus to help me expand sort of my more psychic abilities and intuition and so on and so forth. And I like to have animals around. I like to have statues of animals. I like to have real animals. There's actually two of them on the floor outside of the view of the camera who are around me, and I think animals are an extremely important part of my life as a witch. For a very, very long time, I only had 3 decks, and I thought it was satisfied with only having a few cards. But when I started to work on more stonework, because I felt like I was limited in my knowledge of how crystals works and stones, I started to make bracelets, like the one that I have here with all the citrine on it, both chips and spheres. This middle piece is just a marble. I found that I wanted to do a bracelet based off of these concepts behind tarot. And when I started to do that work, I discovered I don't know much about cards. Even though I've been doing it for years and I have these decks, I found that I wanted to learn more. So, having decided to do these reviews, I have learned so much by picking up different decks and reading different authors' opinions on tarot, on the different themes the different decks can have and how they resonate, the different spreads. So tarot cards are, for me, an important tool in being a witch. This deck takes that very seriously. I feel like being a witch is something that I would never walk away from, and it's a journey of joy. It is a journey of processing emotions and learning and all sorts of different things. And when it comes to the different aspects of being a witch, I feel like this deck nails it. I feel that there is both whimsy and beauty and power and animals. Lots of animals. I don't think I've ever met a witch that didn't like animals, to be honest. Most of them have multiple cats or dogs, and sometimes other animals as well. So this is one of my moonstones. It's a flat, and I think being one of my newer acquisitions, it's going to help us today. I've got some of the buddies here, some kunzite, which I like to keep on me just to sort of boost my energy. Love feeling good, yeah. So first thing you notice about this doesn't slide off like you have seen most of my other ones. This is like a book cover. It opens, and there you have the beautiful book that it comes with. There is some sort of magnetic strip here, and it closes, and there's a ribbon so that you can pull this out. Covered in stars, very heavy duty, good stock, very pretty. You've got lots of blues and yellows, and that continues on inside the box. You have lots of yellows and little paw prints in the stars, and lots of blues in the background. And even on the front of this page for the book, you find much of what I have laid out here. You have runes and a sphere and an animal, and you have cards, and you have lots of books in the background. The concept of being a witch, of course, has changed from even when my mentor first started back in the 70s until now. And it is being refined as the years go by. But I feel like this deck combines both that sort of modern witchness and the whimsy of sort of days yonder of being a witch. So, the backs of the decks, we have our beautiful pointed hats, our black cat, and a broom, which are all imageries that anyone would put together when they were thinking about a witch, and beautiful stars. And another more, we have more of this yellow and blue coloration here. So we have a very sturdy little nestle for the cards and the ribbon to pull them out in. So it's very obvious to me that they intended everything to stay together. And as you notice, there is no little white book in this deck because they wanted everything to come through in a very meaty kind of a way. Not only is this an amazing foreword that goes on and on and on about how this deck came about, what it means to the author, and so on and so forth, because this deck was really just an illustration that somebody liked so much it turned into a deck. But the whole process of how it got here, and there are full colors of the cards every time they show up, even not just in the deck itself where it's going over like what the things mean, but even in the 4 pages you have full color, and it is that glossy, gorgeous print, and every single card has a section that you can take notes on it. So this book is meant for you to personalize how you feel about this deck. There is nothing about this deck that says this should be temporary or this should be something that you just put on a shelf and don't use. This is absolutely one of those decks that you are expected to use on a daily basis. So, more than anything in any one of these decks that I've gone through, I believe that this book is an excellent addition to any witch who's very serious about continuing. It would be a lovely book for a beginning witch. It would be a lovely book for somebody who has done it for years and wants to dig deeper into it. Me having this journey of trying to learn more about tarot myself, this may be the book that I put all my notes in about each and every card, because I already have a book laid out for the bracelets for each one that I was planning on using. But adding those notes into this book personalizes it for me and says, when I have a student or a child who wants to know what I thought about these cards, having this book with all my notes in it will be an amazing thing for them to have. And I don't know if it's something that they would hand down or give to, you know, somebody else to say, look, this is my mentor, or this is my mother, and this is how, you know, she felt about these cards and how they differ from what the book says, and so on and so forth. And even at the back of the book, there's more sort of discussion about the cards. So we've also got some spreads at the back. There's a 1-card spread, there's a Celtic cross spread, which are pretty standard spreads. Included in most of them. The sort of difference in this Celtic cross spread is that you have the cards next to each other in the middle instead of crossing each other, which is slightly different, but I think that they did that just so that you would understand. So let's get into it. So we have the Fool. We have what you would consider a standard image of a witch: pointed black hat, black clothes, broom, and striped socks. Cheerfully, playfully near a cliff over an ocean. So there is a sense of foolishness that you kind of have to have when you are a witch. A lot of people are going to doubt your intuition and magic in general. So I feel like to start off the deck, this is a beautiful way of doing it, of nodding at all the traditional imagery and saying, yes, I am this, I am witch. And then we step into another card, which is described in the book as being sort of androgynous. You have a figure with longer hair, could be masculine, could be feminine, and you have the self-standard images on the table that you would normally have. You've got the cup and the wand and the pentacle and the dagger for a sword. The difference that you see in this one versus the other one is the other one seems to have like pretty cloth on there. It seems to be pretty stiff. This guy seems to have laid a board on top of a log, and it's got some pillars behind him. And this seems like a wild place, not a cutesy little temple or anything else like that, but this is a place in the middle of a garden or at the edge of some sort of land that have some pillars, that there's some smog at the bottom, some smoke, maybe early morning or late at night. So it is definitely a wild place. He has these cups, he has these tools, but he's using them in accord with nature. And this is the card that is, of course, on the front of the book. You have the High Priestess. You have a standard picture of a witch. She's got the imagery, instead of the pillars being black and white, the candles that she's using on these pillars behind here is black and white. You've got books in the background because knowledge is always a part of being a witch. And you have her cards on one side and runes and the cat and her crystal in the middle. And she is gazing and meditating and considering, of course, whatever she needs to contemplate. I enjoyed this Empress card because oftentimes you're going to see the Empress sitting down and she seems passive, inactive. There's sort of a lack of dynamicness in the cards that have her sitting. This one, she's obviously standing up. There's still a fertility feel to it because you have the beautiful fruit tree in the background and the animals at her feet. And she has this wind blowing through her hair and her skirt. And she has this glowing staff and crown. She's still quite very much a queen, and she's got this full belly for pregnancy that she's obviously cupping. It is a very wild scene, just like the Magician I typically think of as not particularly like a nature card. This one I do, but this one is even more so. She's not on a throne, she's in the middle of an orchard, and you've got wildflowers behind her and trees, which you can have trees in the Empress card, but they seem to be the predominant thing instead of a throne. This one, again, we have most of these characters set in sort of this wild type of background. He's got these rigid rocks behind him, and he's got these plans in front of him, and a dog is at his side. And he's got a staff, much like the Empress before him, although the staff is definitely a different design. But he himself seems confident, and his crown, of course, has horns, which most witches don't so much believe in the devil as the Horned Lord, who is more of a physical being, while the goddess is more of a intuitive, immaterial being. So, here's the first card that we really go kind of modern with this deck. And you see a woman on mats doing yoga as the Hierophant. Yoga teachers in general are sort of these wise beings that I've always sort of admired, and the fact that you have a witch in that sort of scenario with her striped socks / leggings, teaching others to center themselves and visualize. I feel like it's a very appropriate way to have the Hierophant in these sort of nowadays. Now the Lover card is interesting because they're not facing you in this one. You've got sort of this bonfire with this large ephemeral smoke that's intertwining, and even the cats at the bottom are intertwining with their tails sort of making a heart. The fingers, everything here sort of is intertwining. Even with this, you can't tell if it's a male or a female, or two females, or two males. This is sort of one of those cards that can really go both ways when it comes to, gender. They're not really defining this as a male or female relationship. It's either male, 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 female, female, male. It goes all of those ways, which I think is amazingly progressive for this card. I know that they talked about in the book having some of the characters and being sort of androgynous so that people could sort of project whatever gender they felt like on it. The Chariot card is beautiful. You've got a witch on a motorcycle with a side cart, and that typical black that we wear has suddenly become a leather jacket, and you have the cat with the scarf and helmet. Making a decision is actually what this card comes down to in the translation for this deck, and I feel like that's really, you know, a good interpretation of the Chariot. And here we are. Here is the card that I fell in love with so many years ago and I had forever. And when I came through and I was flipping through this deck, I'm always like a strength card kind of a girl. I'm a Leo, can't help it. And it usually does show up a lot for me anyways. You have this sort of Wizard of Oz feel. You have a lion and a tornado in the background. And she is obviously sort of inspiring the weather with her wand. She's powerful and strong, but you can tell that she's gentle with the lion. She's not violent. She's just powerful. And it's just one of these beautiful cards that, of course, I fell in love with long before I knew it was even a tarot card. Hermit. Good interpretation here. You have a lady all by herself in the woods with a bonfire. She appears to be camping. She's got a kitty with her and an owl in the tree, and she's taking time to herself, meditating and enjoying nature. Wheel of Fortune. Sort of a modern idea of it, where you literally have a wheel with the things you want on it. Instead of sort of that karmic wheel of ups and downs. This one has all good things. I don't see really any negatives on this. There's a lot of Wheel of Fortune cards where I see that the whole thing is just torture. So more of a positive bent on that. Justice here is interesting. Two cats are obviously fighting. Her blindfold is lifted slightly. She has the law book in one hand, and she's really not as blind as she seems, apparently. It's an interesting interpretation of this card. I think what here we're trying to say is that we should be aware of all the situations, but we should be unbiased in our justice and our decisions. Here we have the Hanged Man. This one is interesting because it's a broom that he's locked himself to. And he seems very, very serene, and he has the key in his hand. He could get himself out if he wanted to, but for whatever reason, he has chosen this position to do so. So, although the key's got kind of glow to it, so maybe the key itself is magical. Doesn't seem to be a gold key for these locks. We have death here. This is a, you know, one of these death cards where instead of being a skeleton, we have sort of this white masked figure with a sword, and he's cutting some sort of rope. And you have one door that's closed, and you've got one door that's starting to peek open. There's a lot of imagery here for like transitions, like something ending and something beginning, so on and so forth. It's an excellent interpretation, if a bit weird and different. Temperance. Temperance usually has some sort of cup of some kind. This one seems to go sort of with food. She's got one eye open, one eye closed, one leg up, one leg down. She's got health food on one side, and she's got like a martini and cupcakes on the other side. So balance. Balance, balance, balance. Literal balance, balance in your diet. So we have the Devil card. This one seemingly is a male who is tempting these two children with money and with sweets. I actually kind of want to read this card because I always find it interesting with witch style decks how they interpret the devil. It's usually not standard. Handsome devil of a mage with dark hair, a pointed black beard, and a swirling black cape is offering money to a young male witch, an ice cream cone to a young female witch. While he is smiling and pleasant, the pointed tail curls out from beneath his cape, and his eyes have a reddish gleam. Each witch has a cat who's trying to pull them away and is being ignored. A volcano smokes in the far background. The mood is ominous, but not hopeless. Contrary to what you might think, the devil doesn't represent some evil being who comes from outside world to lure and ensnare us. That would be easier to fight than the reality, which is that each of us has devils that we have created for ourselves. Addictions, bad habits, obsessions, unhealthy decisions that we cling to long after it's clear they are leading us in the wrong direction or holding our lives hostage. Temptation can be so hard to resist. That makes this seem like a scary or hopeless card, but it isn't. We often hold on to the devil we know because we are comfortable with the negativity and dysfunction we are used to than the idea of starting over, creating something better. But you can do it. You chose the devil, and you can choose to say, no more. The devil you know isn't necessarily better than the one you don't. So, temptation. Interesting. So, the next card we have is the Tower. I read this interpretation before because I thought it was very interesting. She has wrecked this tower. You can tell by the sparkle in her wand and the gleam in her eye. She has done this on purpose. She has wrecked something that is no longer useful for her, and she's just done with it. The Star. Beautiful, beautiful witch, white clothes. Not your standard, but definitely a good interpretation. Standing in a river. There's a lot of the imagery that you would normally see in a standard star card. Of course, except that this one is clothed. Maybe that's why she's in white, because most star cards are naked. We have the Moon. We have a witch in a very stylized form against the moon, which you've seen probably many times, that kind of shape and image. And then you see a normal black cat who's looking in the river to see a puma in the water. The Moon card is always one of those deeper reflections underneath kind of situation. This one is pretty beautiful. You've got the sun and some sunflowers. You have a pregnant lady and a young woman and an older woman dancing. Seems like a very happy family. Good times, good times, good times. Judgment. I'm gonna have to read this card because I think this one's interesting. Judgment is normally a pretty scary card looking, like people raising from the dead, some sort of creature in judgment of people. But this one just seems to be a lady playing a flute with a cat who is dancing. It's not what I would consider to be a standard imagery for this card. So let me read this one too. A witch in the black hat dances merrily down a path while playing a recorder while wearing a short black tunic that shows off her striped stockings. A black kitten bounces in her wake, chasing a butterfly that flits among the musical notes. A shining light beckons from the direction they are heading. The mood is anticipation. The Judgment card is often perceived as something ominous due to the traditional picture that features in naked people being summoned by the angel Gabriel's trumpet. What isn't clear is that this call is less about being judged by someone else and more about taking a look at your own life and finding it unsatisfactory. Our witch on the card follows the music that only she can hear, played along as she moves happily down the path toward rebirth, renewal, and letting go. She is light of heart and feet because she has put down old grudges and hurts that were dragging her down. There is joy in finally heeding the call to your life that you're meant to be living. Things to consider. Are you following your own music or dancing to somebody else's tune? The Judgment card reminds us to listen to our own inner wisdom. It can also be a suggestion that we are judging ourselves too harshly or taking others in judgment to heart. This card shows up in your reading and may be an indication it's time to let go of the old and embrace the new. Rebirth and renewal await if you're willing to go down the path that will take you to them. Okay. We got one more major arcana, and then we'll talk about the minor arcana. We have the World card. She's happy on a beach. Her hat is blowing up the wind. There's a beautiful picnic behind her and a gorgeous house. This seems beautiful, amazing, serene. We're gonna read this one too. Only because, again, not standard imagery for this card. A witch throws her black hat. Oh, didn't pick up the wind. She threw it and sails away in the wind. The sun is shining as she's on tropical beach with her bare feet in the waves as they meet the shore. A little further from the water, there's a blanket spread with a feast, including a large glass with fruit on a stick and tiny umbrella. A black cat sits by the blanket looking pleased. The mood is of joyous and attainment of all desires. This witch may have taken a long journey to get here, but alas, she is right where she needs to be. Break out the bubbly and strike up the band. A lot to celebrate. The World's card signifies completion, attainment of goals, and success in whatever endeavors you have been pursuing. If it is the final future card in a reading, no matter what comes before it, you will triumph in the end. The World is another one of those rare cards that has no negative interpretations. Nothing but good times ahead, baby. You did it. Pat yourself in the back. Hell, have someone else pat you on the back too. You deserve it. So, a very upbeat deck. No doubt about that. A lot of really positive interpretations of what are typically ominous cards. We have a lot of beautiful imagery when it comes to some of the minor arcana. Two of Swords is not one that I thought of in that sort of fashion. This one's pretty good. So usually Three of Swords is three hearts, a heart with three swords into it. And this one is a sort of box of chocolates with three daggers stabbed into it and a journal with some ink spilled. So this is sort of this ominous separation, loneliness feeling. The further you get into the minor arcana, you start to feel that some of these cards are just reinterpretations of the Rider-Waite cards. Five of Swords is a really interesting one. It's typically disappointment of some kind, and it plays out here pretty well. One Witch on the side looks pretty happy with herself though, so I'm not sure. Yeah, a lot of these just seem like reinterpretations of the Rider-Waite cards. Beautiful, no doubt about it, but still something that you would find familiar if you were very familiar with that original deck. So, I don't think I'm going to go through the whole thing, even though the cards are pretty enough to go over and over and over. Ten of Pentacles, definitely one of those happier cards. It's really well done here. Five of Pentacles, very similar to what you would find in a standard Five of Pentacles, sort of this winter scene of despair. Four of Pentacles, sort of the Hoarder's card, also reimagining of that type of stuff. I'm particularly fond of the Queen of Wands card. We've got a dragon. It's really pretty. Look at her dress. She's got some beautiful flowers. Looks like there's a hummingbird. It's just a gorgeous card. And even the Knight of Wands has like this dragon imagery in it, so it's pretty cool. Doesn't seem there to be neither the page or the king, but Wands both goes with broomsticks in this deck or actual literal wands, so not so much a staves reinterpretation. Six of Wands was one of my favorite cards in the Halloween deck, and every time I see it I can't think of it and compare it to the other versions of it. I think this is a very good version of that card. The Cups cards are all beach cards, which is, you know, obviously appropriate, but also very pretty. I love this sort of shell thing. I should probably find myself a mermaid deck, since I like the sort of beach shell interpretation. This one's really cute. He's got a bunch of heart bubbles. It's pretty awesome. Which choosing between all the things that she wants in like a spell shop. Very appropriate interpretation of this particular card. I really do enjoy it. And then Five of Cups is always someone has a whole bunch of awesome things but has lost some of her awesome things and is only focused on the negative. It's a good interpretation of that card. The swords are interesting in the way they seem to be a little bit more severe than the rest of the deck. Lots of gray hair. This lady's throne looks really uncomfortable, let's be honest. Yikes. And I don't know if he's fighting the birds or the birds are helping him fight other things, but the Knight of Swords has got some fighting going on. And of course, last but not least, we have our Despair card of all despairs, the Ten of Swords. Very good interpretation of this. She's obviously not dead, although they typically picture her as dead. You can see that some of these swords aren't actually pierced her, that have just pierced her cloak. So I think it's a good distinction between what the card sometimes is interpreted as and what it really should be interpreted as is like sort of a things seem worse than they are. So I've gone over who designed this deck, but I would like to say before I finish the publisher. So, Favorable Fortunes for Curious Witches. Let me see. Where's the publisher on this? Oh, Llewellyn. So, Llewellyn does good work. I can't say that I've seen any of their stuff or their decks that I don't absolutely think are gorgeous. They're maybe on the pricey side, but you get what you pay for. You get fantastically well-designed box, great artwork, a full book with lots of explanation, you know, and lots of room to grow and write notes. So my recommendation, of course, is if you're a witch to, of course, invest in the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, because you're going to find that if you understand that a lot of other decks will come easier. But once you're comfortable with that, or if you know somebody who's used that enough with you and you want your own deck that's not necessarily that, this would be a good deck to have as long as you understand sort of the imagery that comes from that deck, and has influenced countless other decks, including this one. So this really is going to be sort of that go-to deck for me that as a witch I'm going to be continually growing and expanding and whatnot, and this is going to be here with me the whole way. It makes sense for me. I absolutely adore the artwork. It's just that lovely meeting between pushing the boundaries of what I can do, but still having that sort of reminiscing beautifulness. And this, again, is one of these decks that I wouldn't be ashamed to put in front of children. I would not be ashamed to give this to a 12-year-old and say, hey, this is your first deck, go for it. There's nothing graphic about this. There's nothing like ridiculously violent. Of course, with the swords deck, you have people pierced, but obviously that lady wasn't dead. So, and the star card, which is typically naked, has clothes on it. So, a lot of the violence and nudity that you can find in quite a few decks isn't here. So I would not be ashamed to give this to a young woman or a young man who maybe likes the witch imagery, because like I said, this deck has both male and female characters on the cards, and some characters that are androgynous that you can associate with whether you are male or female or non-binary. So when it comes to being a witch, it's not an easy road. It's a very lonely road in the United States, because you have a lot of prejudice that you have to face, and as a female witch, a lot of guys won't date you. This is unfortunate. I have met a great deal of amazing men who were just sort of terrified of magic. So having a deck like this that says, yes, we see you, this is just for you, is amazing. And I do plan on using it quite a bit. So if you liked this video, please subscribe. Click on one of my other videos if you want to watch another one. Like this video, make any comments that you would like to make, ask any questions. I have the Instagram and the Facebook and the Etsy shop if you want to get into any of the bracelets that I've made. There's an email there, of course, if you want to email me directly. I would be happy to answer any questions and respond to any of the comments. If you need any recommendations for places maybe that you want to go and learn how to do tarot card readings, or maybe find somebody that you could talk to mentor you if you're a new witch, I'd be more than happy to help you out with that as well. It can be hard to start, and a lot of people can be a little prejudiced toward young girls getting into being a witch. It is one of the only realms where power comes from the woman and not is associated with a man. And oftentimes young men have to find their power in their fathers and other things. So it can be quite empowering for young men as well. So now I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do next. So a preview for next week, or at least my next video. I'm not sure if it'll be next week or not. I was lent a deck by my friend Leland, who has quite a few beautiful decks, but this is her favorite. This is called the Botticelli deck, and I will be reviewing this next. It is a very beautiful gilded tarot deck. Has sort of this medieval art style to it. The standard 78 tarot deck, and I want to review it next so that I can get it back to him, and he can have his cards back, and I won't forget to give it back, because I have some of Leland's things I forget to give back. So look forward to this. This will be coming up soon. I made another video today that talked about the differences in decks and so forth. So if you do have questions about that, feel free to watch that video. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.